to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Julia Boyer. Julia is a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2027, and she and I recently connected to talk more about her background, what led her to Darden, what she's enjoyed about her first year, her summer plans, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Julia Boyer. Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, great to be here.
It's great to talk with you. How's everything? How are you doing?
Doing great. Had a few weeks to rest up after school ending, so right now I'm doing great.
Yeah, how does it feel to be at the end of your first year, turning the corner to your second year?
It's a little bit crazy. What a whirlwind of the last 9 months or so. It's been nice to have a few weeks off before my internship starts to reflect on everything and decompress from what was a kind of a sprint of the last 9 months and do a little bit of rest before starting in about a week and a half for my internship.
What will you be doing this summer?
I am headed, doing consulting. I'm headed to Bain in their Washington, D.C. office, and not sure exactly what my case is going to be or anything like that, but going into consulting.
Are you excited to be in DC?
I am. I'm actually, I think, one of the few people headed to DC for the summer, at least at Bain, who lived in DC before. So I was there for 3 or 4 years before coming to Darden. So pretty familiar with the area already, but it'll be nice to be back and see some of my friends who are still there and um, get to go back to my favorite restaurants and spots.
Yeah, I'd say this as somebody who lives in DC. I'm curious, what's on your short list of things you want to do when you're back in the district?
Yeah, well, as you probably know, DC changes pretty quickly, so there's a lot of new restaurants. I am a big fan of Old Ebbitt's, which is just a couple blocks away from the Bain office. I have a very particular order every time I go, so I've already taken some of the Bain interns when we were there back in January. So excited to go back. And then I know outside of food, it's America's 250th anniversary, so a lot of museums and kind of new things that are there specifically for I think the whole year, but this summer, 4th of July, all of that.
Yeah, it's the 250th celebration. Uh, it's interesting. Some of the embassies have started rolling out their connection to the 250th, the
Mm.
American independence. I walked by the Hungarian embassy the other night. There's a connection between Hungary and the American cavalry during the War for Independence. Did not know
All
that.
right.
Learning new things all the time. Well, tell me, what's your very specific order at Old Ebbitt Grill?
Oh, I love I think it's just called the steak salad. It's kind of like a green goddess steak salad. And then I love a dirty martini. So I get a dirty martini and a steak salad every time I go.
Signature. That's a
That's the
okay.
signature order.
Wow. I've lived in DC now for almost 10 years. I still have not been there. So I need to do something about this and maybe I'll go have the steak salad.
Have the steak
Self-made.
salad. It's great. Everything they have is great, but very, very American. So there you go.
There you go. That's
Great
right.
for this year specifically.
Well, it's great having you here on the podcast. We started to talk a little bit about your background, but tell us what you did before coming to Dart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I was in DC before Darden. I worked in, I like to call it essentially like I was government adjacent. I worked in public higher education. So I worked for an organization that represents public universities across the United States. And I specifically worked with university presidents primarily at urban institutions. So universities located in urban areas and helping the presidents and then their like sort of senior cabinet really address pretty much any issue that they were facing at the time I was there, kind of at the tail end of COVID. I'm not sure what exactly constitutes the tail end of COVID, but dealing with some of the fallout of enrollment. How do you go back to in-person classes? All of that that came along with COVID, and then also very timely, kind of discussing AI. What do those policies look like? Workforce development, higher ed is at, I think, a very interesting position right now. And so helping them sort of navigate what does the future look like for this institution in 1 year, 5 years, or 20 years, or 50 years down the line. And it's very different for different institutions. So kind of helping them navigate whatever it was that each campus was facing.
That's a complex slate of things to work on. Working through COVID, I still remember those days. It seems like forever ago. Wasn't that long ago, but man, you're right. So many things for schools to think through. Going to fully remote, then trying to figure out how you could have some people in person, but maybe not everybody in person. And then at some point, all right, we're going to all be back together and adjusting to all the sort of enrollment ups and downs during that. People decided to go back to school, and then some people were maybe reluctant to go to school, depending upon the format. And then it's all kinds of stuff. And then AI, which is seems always in the news. It seems like every day there's another story and new technologies coming out and new things that are changing. I mean, I'm trying to remember, basically my understanding of AI started with, hey, did you hear about this thing called Chat GPT that's
Yep.
available? And look where we are now. So,
Yeah, times have changed very quickly, I think.
yeah, how did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
Yeah, so it definitely came from my pre-Darden kind of career. I guess to take you back a little bit, I went to Ohio State for my undergraduate degree, and I was sort of in high school, was coming around the like 2016 election, very much knew I wanted to work in politics. So my undergraduate degree was in, it has a long, long title, but essentially public policy, and I really valued what I learned from that program, but it was a very specific program. So I very much focused on policy. I felt like I didn't get a lot of the sort of quantitative data analysis is a big thing that people talk about now, that bringing numbers in can be really important. And so I dove headfirst into like policy and sort of the government world, working in higher ed and what that looks like with interaction with government. And so I very much, I think, twofold. If you're in DC, I think a fairly common experience and something I was told by a lot of sort of mentors and people that I talked with as I did internships and then went full time in DC was that about 3 to 5 years after you go full time, if you're working in sort of government or like the nonprofit space, it's pretty common to hit sort of a kind of a ceiling and not be able to move much higher into management roles without some kind of master's degree. So, not necessarily an MBA, but some kind of program. And so I knew that at some point in time, probably 3 to 5 years after graduating from undergrad, that I would go back to school. And then when it came time to really decide what degree did I actually want to get, I loved policy, but knew that I did not want to go back for an MPA or an MPP. I felt like I had already gotten a lot of what I would have gotten out of one of those programs. And I think in my work experience, I was very lucky to work with some phenomenal people, very well educated, who very much had skill sets in leading people and kind of working with different organizations and had a lot of kind of that background in education. But when you're working with the government, when you're working with higher ed institutions, you very much, we were working with the Department of Ed, working with organizations that were like granting money. You also have to have that quantitative side. So being able to put together a very strict and firm budget for what you're maybe requesting out of your state if you're on a campus, being able to put that together, or data analytics, if you're looking at enrollment, how can you utilize that to inform your decisions? And so I very much knew, kind of recognized that those were things I didn't have as much of a background in and would be very helpful moving forward, whether I wanted to stay in education, I wanted to stay in kind of the policy realm. And so an MBA was kind of the program that fit that bill. I really came, yes, for the career to some extent, but I really came for the academics. I wanted to learn finance. I wanted to learn kind of data analytics and some of that stuff that I didn't feel I got as much out of my undergrad program. And MBA was sort of the program that encompassed all of really what I was looking for.
And what is it about Darden that appealed to you?
Yeah. I think there were a few things. A location at the time. I am going back to DC. I was sort of exploring a few different locations, but knowing that I had an interest in going back to DC, Darden made a lot of sense because there's a strong alumni group here in, or not here, but in DC. And so I knew, I've always, having gone to Ohio State, I was a part of the Alumni Association in DC, and that's very big for me, is having a community. And so A was just the proximity to DC. And Darden also has, a location in DC. And so being able to have that proximity there, as well as I think the academics, the people, definitely the community drew me out. But it was the academics, kind of going back to my main goal of the program was to learn. And, I can't speak to what it's like to be at a different program, but what I really heard from going to info sessions and talking to people, and then once I was admitted, like talking to students and things, really got the sense and have since then experienced the importance of academics, the case method a little bit, and having to go to class, attendance and speaking in class is a big part of being at Darden. And that was something I wanted a program that was going to push me and challenge me to learn. And I think sometimes when you get caught up in recruiting or whatever, it's easy to, oh, I'll just skip that class one day, or oh, I won't read that case. But at Darden, you can't really do that. And so I think the academics was what really, at least initially, kind of drew me to Darden and was one of the things that stood out from other programs.
Yeah, that's been a sort of consistent thread here on the podcast. We talked with students about what's resonated with them, about what resonated with them about the Darden experience. Invariably, it does come back to academics and wanting to learn and kind of be in class and be challenged. That I've heard that pretty consistently from folks. I mean, that is what Darden is about.
Yep.
So you come to Darden, you're a brand new student, adjusting to being a first year. What was that adjustment like? Being back in the classroom, being in a graduate business school setting. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. I, hadn't been out of the classroom for too long. I kind of alluded to this, but I'm on the younger end, so I had been out just over 3 years from my undergrad when coming back to Darden. So it hadn't been too far out of sort of the classroom experience, but Darden, at least with my undergraduate experience, is very, very different than how I sat in a classroom before. So I think the adjustment period to the way that class is run at Darden is always participating, having your hand up. I think that was tough at the beginning of always kind of being prepared and having something to say. I think I've always been used to in the classroom raising my hand when I had a fully formed thought and knew what I wanted to say. And that's not necessarily the case at Darden. You kind of have to jump in and be able to roll with the punches and have a thought on what you wanna say, but be able to kind of roll with it, and that was a tough adjustment. Also, just the amount of things that are thrown at you, it's something I really value about Darden. I am one of the people who's involved in, like, 7,000,000 things because there are so many things that interest me at Darden, but kind of in the business experience, and I know I only get 2 years in this program, so wanting to take full advantage of it, but I think that's also a challenge is you are doing so much that's new to you, and I think I was somebody who came in not expecting it to be as overwhelming as it was. I mean, it definitely was a little bit of an adjustment period of, you're in a new place, you're with new people. I also felt very much like I was sort of a fish out of water a little bit, in that I was coming from the government world and this is absolutely not the case, but I felt like I was one of the only people who didn't know accounting or didn't know finance, which is not true, but it's very easy in those settings to feel like you're the only one who doesn't know what, some accounting rule is or credits and debits or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, that adjustment period, it was quite the time and I think lasted a little bit longer than I was expecting it to. I feel like the first 2 quarters of core were roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, and I find sometimes when students go to class, they may have a few classmates who are very familiar with the subject that's being discussed, right? That
Mhm.
did it before coming to school, or with our working professional students are currently in that industry, and so live and breathe it every day. Nobody places out
Yep.
of class at Darden, and they'll say something or have some insight and use some kind of jargon or thing, and students who don't have that background will be like, how does that person know all this? Like, what happened? Did I miss something? And it's just the nature of, like, they've spent a lot more time with this than you have, and it can be easy to start comparing yourself to that person, and that's, I think, a real slippery slope for folks. I generally encourage folks
Absolutely.
not to do that.
For sure.
So Julia, tell us about your section. What section were you?
Oh, I am a very proud Section D dragon. I was in Section D, and I'm a little bit biased, but I think they were a phenomenal group. We had a great time, and it was definitely a little bit sad at the end of Q3 to wrap up, you know, being around them all day, every day. But yes, I'm a very proud dragon.
Yeah, everybody comes on and says, "Well, of course, my section was the best section." I appreciate that level of section pride. What was your favorite thing that you did within your section, whether it's a sort of norm, tradition? What stands out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the obvious answers is we all the sections have a cheer. Everybody has a different cheer. But I think, sometimes I feel like going back to summer camp, or sometimes I would say to my family, yeah, I'm back in like high school again, middle school. But that was really a fun way to start and end every day. We definitely got a little bit loose with it at the end of Q2 and Q3, but especially at the beginning of the year we were great about every morning at 8 a.m., whatever professor we had that day, stood back for a second. We did our cheer. We also, I believe this is common for most sections, and I will keep it a secret as to what our item is, but we have a kind of item that we pass off every week to somebody in the section who so we want to honor in some way. So everybody has it for 1 week. You have to protect the item from other sections, and that's the person that leads the cheer for the week. So it's also really fun in within that tradition to then have different classmates come up and be leading the cheer, and also getting to recognize different people in the section for different things. You have like your very loud, boisterous people who run the cheer, and then we have a couple of people in our section who got it who were very quiet and shy, and it was fun to kind of see people come out of their shell throughout, from the first few weeks to the last few weeks of core, and really just getting to know everybody throughout the process.
Yeah, that is a real sort of anchor for you as you go through the first year experience, your section. You're with them through all your core classes, and I think you know what we hear sometimes when people go and take electives, they're like, "Oh, well, it's nice to be in class with other people, right? I'm getting to see and meet other
Mhm.
people," but they kind of miss their section too, at least initially
Absolutely.
as they start taking electives. I'm not going to ask you to do the cheer, but what is the section D cheer?
Oh, well, now you're putting me on the spot to
Yeah.
remember exactly, what it is, but, we bang on the tables, so we kinda start essentially like a drum roll. And then the person up at the front says, "Section D, are you ready?" And then the section cheers it back, "Section D, are you ready?" And then we actually ended up changing up the cheer this year. So the section D the year before us, our second years, used to have or I believe we added in the trampoline, but you used to jump on the desk at the end. Shane, our accounting professor, who's the Section D like faculty lead, or I don't know exactly what his title is, said that it was a safety concern, and so we actually had to end up changing our cheer. So instead of jumping on the desk up in the front of the classroom, we end it with kind of doing like a wave. So the person will then kind of point around the room. Everybody waves their hands up, and then at the end, we all come down and like bang on the table. And every section cheer does a lot of banging, but we tried to be as loud as we could. Our classroom, it goes in alphabetical order. So we were next to section C. So every morning at 8 a.m., we would try and compete about who was the loudest. And so we tried to add in as many bangs as we could. People get on the walls, get on the doors, specifically on the wall that goes to section C.
I appreciate that. All right, a little bit of section rivalry. I knew about the jumping on the desk, but I think Shane's right that that is a safety concern. But a wave in a classroom, like the wave like you would see at a major sporting event in a
Yep.
classroom, 8 a.m. in the morning, Monday through Thursday. I appreciate that.
Yeah. It was very fun.
Well, I'm curious, how did your career goals evolve during your first year, or did they? Did they stay kind of the same? Did they change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe a little bit of both. I very much came into, I alluded to a bit about how I came out of my undergrad program feeling like I got a very specific education. And so one of my goals of coming back to an MBA program, I knew that I wanted to do consulting coming into Darden. And so that never changed. I am going into consulting for the summer and more than likely will be going back full time. But I would say my main purpose in wanting to do consulting is I think a lot of people, this is kind of a driving force of going into consulting, is getting to touch so many different industries and functions. And so my career goals, at least coming into the MBA program, was very much just getting to try different things. That's something that I felt I sort of lacked before Darden was I knew I wanted to do politics and I jumped right into that. And I never really maybe got exposed to what all is out there or what are different kind of areas that I can go into. And so In that way, I'd say my career goals did not change. I knew I wanted to go into sort of a generalist program that would allow me to touch different areas. And I think I'm going to get that over the summer and beyond. I will say, I don't know how much they really changed, but it's been very interesting to explore all that Darden has to offer. Talking to alum, I mentioned that I am very involved, maybe too much so at Darden. And so I try and go when there are speakers that come in for lunch sessions or when we have conferences or things like that. I am almost always there if I can make it. And so it's been great being able to be exposed to so many different industries. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can go work in finance. Maybe I'll go work in retail. And so I think just being exposed to all those different options has not necessarily changed my goals. I still don't know if I have a picture of what I want to do in 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure if anybody ever does, but it's been really great to just be able to be exposed and explore, and that was really what I wanted out of an MBA program. So, at least in that way, I feel very successful.
Julia, you're going to have your summer in DC working for Bain, and then you come back to Darden in your second year. What are you looking forward to in the second year? Any activities or clubs, organizations that are on your docket?
Yeah, so many. I think, clubs and organizations looking forward to classes. I am involved in a few clubs. So, in terms of like club leadership, I am on the consulting club board. I serve as the VP of finance. So, I'm the keeper of the purse, if you will, but get to kind of manage that, but also sort of informally help out with consulting recruiting and I my main reason for wanting to be involved in the consulting club is I had a phenomenal second year coach who gave me so much, and so being able to give that back to the people then below me is very important to me. But also being able to bring in different perspectives. I think I sort of alluded to this with the classroom stuff, but I think it's really easy to come in and think that everybody has experience doing working at these big corporate companies. And I didn't feel like I had that. And so to be able to be somebody on the board that, can say, I didn't really know what I was doing. I um, didn't know what all these different metrics were before I came into Darden, before I started consulting recruiting. So just to be able to kind of give that back to students. I am also on the golf club board. I'm the VP of women's engagement. I had never, I think, picked up a golf club before coming to Darden, but that was one of my sort of informal goals of going to business school. My aunt's actually an attorney, and I've heard this from other people that, being able to go out if you're on a company retreat or something and being able to like golf with the partners and have extra face time. It also just feels like something I should pick up. So I'm excited to have some events for particularly the women at Darden. Sometimes golf can be a pretty intimidating sport if you've never done it before, particularly as a woman. So we get out and do women specific lessons and things like that. And then I'm also on the Graduate Women in Business, or GWIB for short. I'm on the GWIB board. I am the VP of Career and Alumni Engagement, I believe is the full title. But I very much wanted to just help women specifically throughout the recruiting process and also beyond recruiting. I think a big thing at Darden that I, understand why it's structured this way, but it is so, so easy to, what are you doing this summer? What are you doing after you graduate? And something for me is this is more than a 2-year program. This is more than one job after graduation. And so being able to explore, what does a career in 30 years look like? What, kind of just hearing from alum and being able to talk to the second years and what does all of that look like? And so being able to build that community specifically for women to kind of learn from each other is one of my big goals. We also don't have too much interaction, at least throughout the first year, from my experience with alumni. And so being able to, like this year, we're hoping to have a happy hour for women alum and then also for current Darden students at reunion weekend to just kind of get together. And what was your experience like at Darden? What has your experience been like after Darden, and being able to kind of run that programming. I'm very excited to, I think, the whole GWIB board, but Gabby specifically is the president of GWIB this coming school year. I think she has a lot of great ideas and a lot of passion and energy behind driving kind of GWIB forward, and excited to work with her and put some fun events on.
Yeah, Gabby's been on the podcast to talk about GWIB, the Graduate Women in Business Club. I think you're also the Forte ambassador. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Yes, I think newly instated. But yes, I am also the Forte ambassador, and went to the conference last summer, which feels like it was 7 years ago. Went out to Denver. The conference was in Denver last year, and it was great, honestly, for me, just to get to meet people, to meet kind of the Darden women who went. I want to say there were about 15 to 20 of us who went last summer. And that was, I think, first and foremost for me, just great to be able to meet other Darden people. We had a couple of Darden staff come along as well, which was great. And then a soft introduction, I think, to recruiting and getting to meet with some companies. I did like a first round interview when I was there. And so also a great sort of resource for the women at Darden, but I think also primarily before going through like the admissions process and learning about business school. I think Forte for me, I did not really know pretty much anybody who had an MBA. I'm sure I tangentially knew people, but there's nobody really in my life, either at work or my family, who had an MBA, who could speak to like going through that process. And so Forte also for me was very helpful in really like learning what the process is like, what's important, what should I focus on, what schools are out there, what does each school bring to the table, and then being able to meet specifically. I mentioned I was in DC, so Forte had an event there in person, and I met Haley, who works in the admissions team at Darden, and getting to kind of meet people in person to chat about it was very helpful going through the process and having it be maybe some smaller events tailored to women. That was a little bit less overwhelming than some of those really large, I think, like big ballroom kind of sessions you can go to that has like every school ever at a table, and they're all like chomping at the bit to talk to you and give you packets and all of that. So yeah, I think Forte is a great organization, and excited to be an ambassador and work with them and all that entails this coming year.
Yeah, and we'll have a group of students at this year's conference down in Atlanta, which is
Yep.
great. You mentioned all the programming. I do think I've heard pretty consistently from folks just the networking piece, just meeting other people and making
Yep.
connections and learning about maybe some different paths, industries, employers. Super helpful for folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Julia, a couple more questions. Started asking people, we have folks who listen to the podcast, never been to Charlottesville, maybe coming to Charlottesville at some point, and maybe curious about things they should try out or do here in Charlottesville. If you had to tell prospective students three things to do while visiting Charlottesville, it could be anything. What would you recommend?
Wow, that's a great question. I will not say I'm a Charlottesville expert by any means, and very excited for second year to have hopefully some more time to explore. I'm a bit of a history nerd, and I worked in higher education, so I am very partial. I know there's a lot of students who have probably never even seen the lawn or seen grounds, which I am used to calling campus, but to see kind of central grounds. But that's definitely the first thing I recommend is seeing the lawn. I believe it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's just beautiful to walk around, especially depending on the time of year. I mean, really, any time of year, Charlottesville is beautiful, but particularly when it's very green and in the fall. But I always recommend that people walk around the lawn and visit the corner, which is where there's lots of, kind of restaurants, businesses. Bodos Bagels is always a top recommendation. I am not from New York. I'm not very partial to bagels. I do love Bodos, and I know people are a big fan of Bodos who are specifically from New York. I've heard the debates before. I think second, something that I love to do in Charlottesville is the wineries, breweries, any kind of, sort of outdoor visit is, I wouldn't say that the Virginia wine is maybe the best in the world, but a lot of it's for the experience. There are some beautiful, beautiful wineries, and you get to see sort of the rolling hills of Charlottesville, and it's great. I've gone out for big group events where there's been a lot of us. I've done recruiting events at them. And then I've also, gone out one on one with friends, brought my family out. And it's always a good time, especially if you get great weather. And I'm trying to think of a third. I mean, I think just to go back to the food, Charlottesville has phenomenal restaurants and just kind of things to do around town. I don't know exactly what the metric is, but I think it at some point, if not currently, had the most restaurants per capita or something along those lines. And there are some great places to go. So I've had the opportunity to go to a good amount, and particularly through recruiting. But again, looking forward to some free time next year and the next few weeks before I start, to go and explore some places I have not yet been.
Yeah, lots of great places to eat in Charlottesville, and, the bagel is really a canvas, I think, for other food. I mean, I don't know, like, most of the like, these are bagel sandwiches by and large. I mean, some people will get just cream cheese or whatever, but, the breakfast bagel sandwich is
Mhm.
very, very popular. A very long line at Bodo's on Saturday and Sunday mornings. You have any number of sandwich places too that all vie for people's sandwich dollars. You have Take It
Yep.
Away, Ivy Provisions, Bel Air. Like I mean, no shortage of places to eat. Low end, high end. You can spend a lot of money dining out in Charlottesville
That
if
you
you want
can.
to. Yes, yeah. Well, Julie, one more question for you. What's a piece of advice you would share with our prospective student listeners? Something you would encourage them to consider as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think I might cheat, and I have sort of 2 pieces that go hand in hand. I think I've touched on it a few times and maybe alluded to it a bit. I mentioned that I'm a little bit younger for the program. And I think something that even when I do admissions events now and talk to people is I think there's so much emphasis in going through MBA application process, and all of this is what school are you going to go to and like rankings and all of that. And yes, that's important, but I always encourage people to consider in that moment, like, do you want an MBA? What is it really that you're gonna get out of? Um, I think it's easy to kind of do it and maybe not have a specific goal in mind. So I just really encourage people as they're going through the process. Yes, it's important to figure out what school fits you best and what will help get you to whatever goals it is that you may have, but also really coming in with a solid idea of outside of the school, what is it that you want out of like an MBA program? I mentioned it's a bit of a roller coaster in those first 9 months, and it can be easy to sort of be knocked off of your why, your purpose of why you're there. And so being able to come in with a very strong, like, this is what I want out of it can be really helpful when you're in that roller coaster of, I think for me, I mentioned it was the academics, it was the learning. Yes, it was getting a job, and yes, it was meeting all these people and all these cool experiences, but it was really the learning. And so sometimes being able to step back for me and just being like, oh, I really have learned a lot, and having that guiding you through the process. I just really encourage people to make sure that they have those goals figured out, and whether that helps you pick out which school or what time is right to go get your MBA. You can only do an MBA once. So I always just want to encourage people to do it at a time when it's right for them and go to the place that's right for them and all of that. And then my second piece of advice along with that, as much as it is so much thinking about what you want and a lot of sort of thinking about life, which can be overwhelming, enjoy where you are in the process. I cannot believe that I'm a week away from starting my summer internship. And I know that that's going to fly by in next year. So enjoy, I think this stands for life in general, but enjoy where you are in the process. It can be very overwhelming, I think, and stressed about deadlines and what comes next and always being ready for the next thing. But enjoy where you are in the process because it goes by very fast.
Well, Julia, thank you so much for your time. It's been great catching up with you, and good luck this summer at Bain.
Thank you so much.
And that was my conversation with Julia Boyer, a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2027 here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, and you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.